Hi and welcome. Today Barbie is going to be doing your math lesson.
Woohoo! We're learning greatest common factors, factoring greatest common factors. Okay, just kidding, it's me. All right, let's get to the PowerPoint. Okay, we just thought it would be fun to kind of do something different for you guys. Be goofy and crazy, yes, I know. Okay, so here we go. Let's start off. Hold on a second down here. Let's start off with our warm-up. So if you want to take a minute and do your warm-up, there's the first one for you. We're just going to simplify. So you're going to do distributive property. Distributive property, so 2w plus 2 plus 2. And then this one, distributive property again, multiply and multiply, so 3x cubed minus 12x. And then find the greatest common factor of each monomials. This was what we did last time. I hope you remembered that when we have the same variables, that it's our lower one, the one with the lowest exponent is the greatest common, is our greatest common factor of our variables. So this one would be 2h. And this one, 13 times 2 is 26, so 13p. All right. So we're going to be factoring polynomials by using the greatest common factor. So this might be a little bit longer of a lesson just because there's a lot in here, okay? Okay, so when we have distributive property, A times B plus A times C equals A times B plus C. So we know that there's an A in here and an A in here, which means we can factor that A out, which is how we get A times then B plus C. So the distributive property allows you to factor out the greatest common factor of the terms in a polynomial to write the factored form of the polynomial. This is all going to make more sense when we get into the examples. So a polynomial is in its factored form, okay? Factored form. When it is written as a product of monomials and polynomials that cannot be factored further. The polynomial 2 times 3x minus 4x is not fully factored. Now, hopefully before you read the rest of it, you can see, oh, it's not fully factored because it has an x in both of them that I can take out. Because the terms in the parentheses have a common factor of x. So the fully factored term would be 2x times 3 minus 4, or essentially 2x times -1, really, because that now becomes a number. Okay, so aligning common factors can help you find the greatest common factor of two or more terms. So let's look at example 1a, factoring using the greatest common factor. So we need to figure out what the greatest common factor is of 2x and 4. So we can look at our factors of 2x squared. Here is 2 times x, and then 4, if we factor that out, is 2 times 2. So our greatest common factor of this one is 2. So I'm going to bring that down. That's a factor we're going to pull out of each of these terms here, of this term and of this term. So then what is left when I have 2x squared? Well, if I took out the 2, I'm just left with x squared. And I'm going to bring down the minus sign. That does not change. And then if I already have 2, if I took a 2 out of 4, then my answer is this, 2 times x minus 2. When you take out your greatest common factor and you bring it down here in front, then whatever is left gets put in the parentheses, and you keep the sign here. This one's a little bit longer, but let's take a look at this one. So first we can do our factor tree here to figure out our common factors. You can look at it and probably see, oh, I know right away what my common factor is. If you do, great. If not, then you need to hang tight. Okay, so my 8x cubed here, I have 2 times 2 times 2 times x times x times x. And then my 4x squared is 2 times 2 times x times x. And then 16x is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times x. Okay, so I need to erase that, otherwise it will, I need to erase that line. I don't know why that keeps happening sometimes, but I will try and fix it. Okay, so let me go back to my pen here. And, okay, and let's get our 2 back in here. Okay, so again, greatest common factor. So 2 and x. Oh, we got another 2 in here. I forgot about that one. 2 times 2 and x. So our greatest common factor. If you can figure out what it is without doing this, then that's okay. You don't have to do all of this. I'm walking you through step by step because I'm not there to really give you the one-on-one instruction. So I'm breaking it down very simply so that when you guys do this on your own, you can go back and re-watch it if you need, or you can re-watch it, you can look at it, you can hopefully study it, and it will help you more. So that means I'm going to take out 4x from each of my terms here, from 8x cubed, from 4x squared, and 16x. So I'm first going to put 4x because that does not go away. I found my greatest common factor and I'm going to take it out of all of these factors, but it still is a part of this equation. So please do not forget to put your greatest common factor before your parentheses. So if I'm taking a 4x out of here, what am I left with? Well, I'm left with 2. Actually, I'm going to go to the highlighter so you can really see. Hold on as I pull it up here. Sometimes it does not want to do with this one. Okay, so I'm left with a 2 and an x and an x. And here with 4x squared, I'm just left with an x. And with 16x, I'm left with 2 times 2. Okay, so now with my 4x squared, we're going to keep these negative signs here. So it's going to be 2x squared minus x minus 4. And that right there is your answer. Now, if you want to check to make sure that you got it right, you could do distributive property with these again to see, oh, did I get it right? Oh yeah, actually I did. So if you do distributive property just to check, this one would be 2x squared minus 4. Oh, yep, that matches that, so check. And this one would be 8x cubed minus 4x squared minus 16x. Oh, check. Yep, it matches that up there, so I got it right. Okay, so there will be a possibility that we will factor out -1 as the first step. So you do need to make sure that we leave -1 in there. Just like in the other ones, we kept the 2 and the 4x. That's because -1 is still a number. So if we factor anything out, it still needs to stay in there. Okay. So for this one, go back to, oh, I do have my pen going on here. Okay. So in this one, you can factor out a negative. So if we want to look at this, it looks like 2 is probably going to be the only thing we can factor, but we'll do the factor tree. So 2 and 7 and 2 and 6, which then is 2 and 3. So, but we've got our negative out here. So what I would do is, for now, let's just figure out what our greatest common factor is, and then we'll add in the negative. So if we have 14x, our our factors are 2, 7, and x. And if we have 12x squared, it's 2 times 2 times 3 times x, okay? Hopefully this is becoming a lot more familiar for you. So we have a greatest common factor of 2 and x, okay? So, but I don't want a negative here in my polynomial, so I'm going to take out a negative. So I'm not just going to make my greatest common factor of 2x, I'm going to make it negative 2x. So I'm going to start with a negative 2x here, which then if I'm taking a negative out of here, it makes this a positive. So then I'm left with just 7. And then I'm taking out the negative again, so I'm making this a positive. And then I'm left with 6x, because that's what's left, 2 times 3 times x. So we do need to take the negative out of these ones here, because it's easier that way. We want to take the negative out. We want to simplify it down to the simplest possible way, and that includes taking out the negative. This one here, clearly we don't need to take out a negative from. And if we look, this is a prime number, this is a prime number. The other number here is, or the two prime numbers here are 2 and 5. But there is no, and then there's an x here and an x here, but no x here. So if we look at this, there are no factors in here that we can take out. We cannot factor this. So then your answer, this just stays the answer. 3x cubed plus 2x squared minus 10. If there was an x right here next to 10, we could factor out an x from the whole thing, but not for this one. Okay, so it's a lot, it's 4 problems, but I really want to make sure that you understand how to factor and how you factor everything. This one doesn't have a variable. It says 8 squared, so you have to solve this first. Okay, so I want you to pause the video and take a moment, and I'm going to come back and show you the answers. Okay, so hopefully you paused the video, and hopefully as you walk through, it's becoming easier to you to figure out greatest common factors and all that stuff. So the answer here is this is 5b, this is a prime factor, and then this is 3 and 3. So there are no number factors here, but there is a b and a b cubed, so I can factor out a b, and I'm going to be left with 5 plus 9 b times 5 plus 9b squared. Over here, this really is 9d squared minus 64. Okay, so we can do, hold on, so we can, if we have 64, this is 3 and 3, and 64 you cannot divide by, you can't divide it by 3. You could divide it by 2, you can divide it by 8. So if you, well, I guess we could look at, I guess you could do 8 squared really as 8 times 8, and then break it up into 2 and 4, 2 and 4, 2, 2, 2, 2. So you see right away that there's no factor of 3. So this actually is just the answer then. There's nothing, you cannot factor that down any more than that. This one over here, we have some y cubed and y squared, so we know, going back to what we learned in the last lesson, that if we have a variable with the same, then it is the one with the lowest exponent that is going to be our greatest common factor. 7 is a prime number, 18 can be 2 and 9, and then 3 and 3, but again, there's no factors, but hopefully you notice that there's the negatives. and we're gonna take out the negative. So our greatest common factor is gonna be negative y squared. Then we're left with 18y plus 7. 18y plus 7. So hopefully you're getting these right and it's making more sense. This one's going to take a little bit more work to it, but if you look here, 2 is the only prime number here. So really, you can take out 2 and x squared because there's an x cubed and an x to the 4th power. So we're going to take out 2x squared, as that's going to be our greatest common factor. Then when you divide that by, when you take out 2x squared from 8x to the 4th, you get 4x squared. And then this becomes 2x minus 1. And again, if you want, go ahead and check your answer here. To do distributive property, 2 times 4 would be 8, and x squared times x squared would be x to the 4th, and then this would be plus 4x cubed minus 2x squared. So check, we got the right answer by factoring. Okay? So if you need some more practice, go back and try them again. Rewind the video to where I say pause this part and go back and do each one and solve it again, and hopefully it will start to make more sense. Or go back and watch the ones that I did previously. Okay. To write expressions for the length and width of a rectangle with the area expressed by a polynomial, you need to write the polynomial as a product. You can write a polynomial as a product by factoring it. Okay, so we're going to be looking at some area here, some area or perimeter. Okay, area. The area of a court for the game of squash is 9x squared plus 6x square meters. Factor this polynomial to find the possible expressions for the dimensions of the squash court. Okay, so here, right here is this, and all it's saying is to factor it. So hopefully you can look and go, okay, well, I've got my 9x squared plus 6x here, and I'm going to take off the the parentheses because we don't really need them at this point. Okay, so right up here, my factor of 9x squared, 3 and 3, and then 2 and 3. So 9x squared would be 3 times x, and then 6x would be 2 times 3 times x. So we can look and go, okay, well, I got a 3 in both of those. I've got an x in both of those. So my factor, my greatest common factor, is going to be 3x. So I'm going to pull out 3x from both of these terms right here. So 3x squared becomes 3x. Okay. I will figure out how I'm doing that and then fix that. Okay, so that becomes, if I take out my greatest common factor of 3x, then this becomes 3x plus 2. Okay, so I took a 3x out of here and I took a 3x out of here. I factored it out of both of those. So 3x times 3x is 9x squared, and 3x times 2 is 6x. So I know these are the possible dimensions, because if we look at area is length times width. So this 3x could be the length and 3x plus 2 could be the width. Who knows? It says we're finding possible expressions for it. Okay, so now it's your turn to pause the video and do this one. Okay, so hopefully you got this one done. This one here we have a factor of 2 and x, because this one, there's a 2 in 4. If we look at the greatest common factor of 2x squared and 4x, it's going to be 2x. So 2x is our greatest common factor. Then we're going to be left with an x plus 2. And again, if we check, 2x plus x equals 2x squared. And then 2x plus 2 equals 4x. So this right here are the possible dimensions of the solar panel. Okay, so sometimes the greatest common factor of terms is a binomial. This greatest common factor is called a common binomial factor. Okay, so we've got a common binomial factor. You factor out a common binomial factor the same way you factor out a monomial factor. So this looks really complicated, but it's not. And I'll show you why. Okay, so right here we have essentially one term and we have another term. Okay, there's an x plus 2 in this term and an x plus 2 in that term. So I am going to factor out the x plus 2. Then when I factor out x plus 2, what am I left with? Oh, well, I'm left with 5 plus 3x. That right there is your answer. That's it. One thing to note with these is that this is the reverse of what we did in chapter 7. How we had 5 plus 3x times x plus 2. And remember how we split it up and we did 5 times x plus 2 plus 3x times x plus 2? Well, and then we simplified that even down even more. Well, in this one, we're just taking this and we're putting it back into, we're essentially just putting it back into this formula here. Back into our multiplying binomials together. Okay, so I think I need a different color. I'm getting sick of red, so let's go with purple. Okay, so over here, this one here, we have again one term and another term over here, and I've got b squared plus 1 and b squared plus 1. So I'm going to factor out b squared plus 1. Then what am I left with? Well, I'm left with my minus 2b, so it's going to be negative 2b. And then you go, well, but Mrs. Combs, there's nothing over here. So is it just 0? It's not just 0. Remember what happens when there's no number here. There's like an imaginary number, and that imaginary number is 1. If you divide b squared plus 1 divided by b squared plus 1, you get 1. You get just 1, the number 1. Okay? So that is that answer right there. Same thing here, except look at this. We have z squared minus 7 and we have 2z cubed plus 1. Are those the same? Nope, you're right. They're not the same. That means we can't factor it out. So this right here is just the answer. There are no common factors in this one. You can't take anything out, so it stays the same. Okay, so here's 2 for you to do. So pause the video and complete these. Okay, so hopefully you took out s plus 6, and then you're left with 4s minus 5. Hopefully from here you took out 2x plus 3, and then you were left with 7x plus what? Plus 1. Hopefully you remember that. Excellent job, you guys. I can already tell. You're doing great. Your brains are growing. Okay, so here's a couple more. So pause the video and try these. Okay, so hopefully in this one you saw that there's a y here and an x here, which means you can't factor these two. So then this one can't be factored. And this one here, you can take out the 5x minus 2, and then you're left with 5x minus 2. So this one is the 5x minus 2 squared. If you put 5x 2 times 5x, or 5 minus 2 times 5 minus 2, I'm fine with that too. Okay. You may be able to factor a polynomial by grouping. When a polynomial has 4 terms, you can make 2 groups and factor out the greatest common factor from each group. So now we're going to take these problems and we're going to go one step further with it. Everything is just one step further, one step further. Okay, so we are going to take this and it's going to look like this equation right here is the whole thing, is going to look like this eventually. Okay, it's going to look like this. We just have to get there. Okay, so I need to erase that because now I've just been in my way. Okay, so here we go. We're going to do this by grouping. So we're going to group the first two, and we're going to group the last two. And yes, I can already hear your answer or your questions. You do that for everyone. You group the first two, and then you group the last two. Okay? And leave the plus sign goes with that too. So now we got to find our greatest common factor. So hopefully you're getting used to greatest common factors right now. And you know that 6 is 2 and 3 and 4 is 2 times 2. So we can factor out 2 times h to the third power because there's a 2 times 3 and 2 times 2. And then going back to what it said, the variable with the lowest exponent is going to be your greatest common factor. So that's why I know my factor of 6 and 4 is 2, and that's why I put h cubed in there, because there's an h cubed in this, and then there's an h cubed in here. Okay, so now what are we left with then? If I factor it out, and I'm going to stick with this whole one first, okay, and then I'm going to factor out this one. So don't move on to this one until you've completely factored out this first one here. So let me just, the yellow one we're going to factor out first, okay? So let's fully factor this out. So we've got 2h cubed, so then I'm left with 3h minus 2, okay? Now I'm gonna figure out what I'm gonna factor from here. Okay, this is a positive. This is, we can factor 2. Let's do, we can do that. 2 and 6, I'm trying to save space here, and 2 times 3. And then this one is 2 times 4 and 2 times 2. Okay, so I'm going to look at my greatest common factor in here. I've got a 2 and a 2. I've got a 2 and a 2. So my greatest common factor of 12 and h is 4. So I'm going to rewrite this. 2 times h cubed times 3h minus 2. And then I'm going to do plus 4. Well, why'd you do plus 4, Mrs. Combs? Well, because this is already plus. So I'm going to leave it. I'm going to take out a positive. I'm going to make it plus 4. Because if you take out a negative, then this becomes a negative and it gets all confusing. So I took out a 4 from here, which means I'm left with 3h. And looky here, I'm left with 3h minus 2. Now, we have to factor this completely. So that means this is not our final answer. But look here, now it looks like example 3, where we have 3h minus 2. And then that is going to be times 2h cubed plus 4. And that is it completely factored. Okay, now I'm going to switch to another color so it doesn't get all muddled and jumbled. Let's do blue. Okay, so again, we're going to look here with The factors of 5 are 1 and 5, and then 15 is 3 and 5. And again, just like with this one, I'm going to take out my y cubed. That's going to be my greatest common factor. So my greatest common factor of this one is 5y cubed. Then I'm left with y, because 5y cubed divided, or 5y to the fourth divided by 5y cubed is just y, minus 3. Plus, I'm going to leave my plus over here. And then all I have here is y times y and 3y. So hopefully you can recognize, yep, my greatest common factor of that is just y. And then I'm left with y minus 3. Looky here, I got the same one, woohoo! Okay, so we have y minus 3 and 5y cubed plus y. And that right there, ladies and gentlemen, is your answer. Ta-da! We did it. Okay, hopefully not as complicated as what it looks like. Hopefully now that we have done example 1, which built on, or which example 2 built on 1, and then example 3 built on that, hopefully it's all starting to make more sense. I wanted to get you super comfortable with factoring and greatest common factors, which was 8-1, and then we again looked at that in 8 at the beginning of 8-1 or 8-2, sorry. And then we looked at just in example 3, doing this right here, all of this stuff, and then now we're just taking it one step further. So go step by step by step, and make sure that you don't miss a step, and you'll be just fine. Okay, so now your turn. Pause the video. I'm going to take a drink of my coffee and solve these problems. Okay, so hopefully you have these done, and you have 3b plus 4 and 2b squared plus 3 as the answer for this one. And this one is r squared plus 6 times 4r plus 1. If you do not get those, then go back and try it again. Watch the example 4 video. Keep trying, keep trying, keep trying. If you get to a point where you're like, okay, Mrs. Combs, I've tried this so much and I have no idea what to do, then let me know and I will upload. I'll upload, or I'll send a video, or I'll work it on a piece of paper for you to see how to solve these problems here. So don't think just because that I'm home that I'm not going to help, because I'm going to help you as much as I possibly can. Okay, so I want you to look at this. This is in your book too. So if two quantities are opposites, their sum is 0. So in this case, we have 5 minus x, and we have x minus 5. If we add them up just like we normally would, we have a negative x plus x, and that equals 0. And then we have 5 minus 5, which also equals 0. That's all this is saying. So all that to say that we can switch this around. Usually we see the x first, and we see it like this, which is what we kind of want to see. We want to see it like this. So we can, if we were to flip this around, really, you can flip it around. It becomes negative x plus 5. How did you know this was a negative? How did you know this was positive, Mrs. Combs? Well, because remember, whenever we solve terms, it's the sign that's in front, and the x has the negative in front. So that's how I knew that this was a negative. The 5 doesn't have a sign. If it doesn't have a sign, it's always positive. So in this case, it can be written like that. So that means we can take out the negative 1 and make it look like this. So if I take out the negative 1 from here, then it looks like x minus 5. This is going to come into play when we solve more factoring in the next example. Okay, I just walked you through that. Okay, so we're going to factor by opposite with opposites. That's what it means when you have a 5 minus x and then an x minus 5. Those are opposites because just like we said before, they become 0. All right, so grouping again. So hopefully you're becoming pros at this. Okay. This, I want you to tell me right now before I say it, what is my greatest common factor of 2x cubed minus 12x squared? Yep, you got it. It's 2x squared. Okay, so if I factor out that, I have 2x squared times x makes 2x cubed. And then I'm going to leave my negative, and then that becomes 6, minus 6. Okay, so then I've got my plus here, and I'm going to factor out what from here? Well, we know that 18 is 2 and 9, and 3 and 3. So I have a 3 that I can factor from here. So I'm going to show you this, and then I'm going to go back and show you another little trick that I learned that I think makes it easier for me, but it might not for you, and that's totally okay. Okay, so the way to solve this would be then to factor out the 3, because you know that the 3 is the factor. So then you're left with here 6 minus x. Okay, so look, I have my opposite of x minus 6 and 6 minus x, which means I need to factor out a negative from one of them. So I'm actually going to factor out a negative from, I wonder if you could guess. Oh, hold on. I did the wrong thing. I'm going to do highlighter. I'm going to factor out my negative from this one here because I want it to look like this, my x minus 6. It's neater, it's nicer. I like it when it looks like that. So that means that this is going to stay the same. Switch back to my blue here. So this is going to stay the same. 2x squared times x minus 6. And then this now is gonna be 3, but I'm gonna factor out a negative 1 from that, and then switch these around. So then it becomes x minus 6. And hopefully you can see, I'll solve it over here. If you do distributive property with the negative, okay, then we're left with negative x plus 6, which, oh, looky here, is 6 minus x. These can be interchangeable as long as you move the sign with it, okay? So, okay, so then you have 2x squared times x minus 6 minus, or plus, you could do plus a negative 3 times x minus 6. So then we can factor out our x minus 6, and then we're left with 2x squared minus 3. I'm going to lose this plus. If you write 2x squared plus a negative 3, you're not wrong. It's just that there's two signs in here, and we don't want two signs. When we're doing these, we want to make it simplified. So when you see a negative and a positive, it just becomes a minus sign, because a positive times a negative equals a negative. So hopefully you remember that from before. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you what I do first. And hopefully I'm going to erase all this stuff over on the side, and I'm going to, you can always come back to this, because this will always come back to these markings here if you just rewind the video a little bit. Okay, I'm going to use a different color here. I haven't used black yet. Okay, so to make this a little easier on yourself, what you could do is you could order it in standard form. So hopefully you remember what standard form is, because no matter which way this is ordered, your factoring will come out to be the same. So I'm going to factor this. I'm going to put this into standard form. Standard form is using the one with the exponent is the greatest exponent first, and then the next exponent, and then the next, and then the next after that. So standard form, 2x cubed minus 12x squared minus 3x plus 18. Okay, see how I brought over the negative from the 3x? So then we can group it like this, okay? We can group it like that. So then we know that this is not gonna change from over here. So 2x squared is gonna be the greatest common factor, and x minus 6. So now when you come to this one here, we don't want this first one to be a negative. So it's in the form of this. You could just take out a negative 3. Well, we know it's going to be 3 from over here, finding the greatest common factor. But you could find the greatest common factor just like what we did. But you could take out a negative from all of this. So then in this, you could take out a negative 3. And then you're left with a negative 3x divided by a negative 3 is just x, and then an 18, if we have 18 divided by negative 3, we know that it becomes a negative 6. Okay, because a positive divided by a negative equals a negative. So then from this step here, look, we're already in our format here because we've already taken the negative out of here. So then we have x minus 6 times 2x squared minus 3. So I like this way better. It seems to be a little bit more simplified because I order it in standard form, then I group it, and then I factor it, but I have to factor it in standard form in order for me to take out the negative. Okay, so the only difference with this one versus the other one is that you have a negative in here. Okay, so I want you to take a minute and I want you to solve these ones. Okay, so hopefully you took a minute and you solved these ones. This one you might be going, oh my goodness, Mrs. Gomes, I have no idea. There's 2 different types of variables in here. I'll walk you through this one. But hopefully this one was pretty straightforward from what we did. And you should have got the answers of 3 minus 2x times 5x squared minus 4. Okay? Let me know if you didn't, I can walk you through that one. So this one we're going to group. And look, the negative is already there, so we might be needing to take a negative out of this one. So we have 8y minus 8, so I'm going to take an 8. Hopefully you recognize right away that same number, so greatest common factor is 8. And then it's y minus 1. Y minus 1 because of 8. 8 divided by 8 is 1. Okay, so now from here, we would be our greatest common factor. Well, let's see. If I took out a negative x, okay, because I don't want a negative, then I'd be left with 1 plus y. So I don't want to take out the negative. So now that I see that, I'm going to go back, and I don't want to take out the negative because then we've got our opposites here. Okay? I don't want opposites. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to, okay, so I'm not going to do the negative right now. I'm just going to do this, okay? So then if I have a negative, no, I'm going to, okay, let's just keep going with it. I realize that I'm probably going to reorder this actually to be 8y minus 8, and then this to be plus xy minus x. Okay, then we can group it like that and group it like that. Okay, and then we take this out. So I'm sorry if I'm confusing you guys. I will redo this in a minute. Okay, so I grouped it so that I put the y first. Here is positive, this y is positive, so I'm going to leave it like that, and I'll show you why I did that in a second. So now I know that I have x and x in here, so I know that my greatest common factor then is x. So I'm going to say plus x, and then I'm going to be left with y minus 1. Okay, that's why I did it. If I was to, so say I didn't do this first, okay, and I left it like this. Let me go back here. Let me just erase this real quick. I'll come back and do this in a minute. Okay, if I didn't do that first, this is what I would get. Okay, I'm gonna erase that real quick. I would get an 8, and I keep having these silly things. Okay. If I didn't erase it, I would be left with 8 and then y minus 1, and then I'd be left with a minus x, and then this would then become 1 minus y, which then has my opposites here. So then I would have to then 8 times y minus 1. Then I'd have to take my negative x times negative 1 and switch it around to be y minus 1. I accidentally wrote a... Okay. Then it'd be y minus 1. Okay, so then this would become 8 times y minus 1. This would become plus x times y minus 1. I just saved myself this step by reordering this first. So let me show you again how I reordered it. Sorry for the confusion here. I really wanted to make sure that that I solved this the easiest way for you. Okay, so I'm going to reorder this one. I have 8y minus 8, and then I'm going to reorder. I'm going to switch these around to make it my plus x, y minus x. Then I can group it, and it's just easier that way. If you have a negative in here in your second one where you know you're going to group it and you're going to be left with a negative, and this one's a positive, then just flip these around. Let's flip around and make it a little bit easier on ourselves. Okay, so then 8 and y minus 1 times, or sorry, plus x, because I got my greatest common factor of plus x, times y minus 1, because if I divide an x out of here, I get y, and if I divide x by x, I get 1. So then I can do my y minus 1 times 8 plus x, and that is my answer. So you can solve it up here like this, but it's just one extra step in here. So I was trying to avoid that one extra step by flipping it around. Okay, so hopefully that makes more sense. Hopefully you got that answer, and we're good to move on. Okay. So again, just like in the other one, we're doing Finding God in Math. We're talking about how God is concerned with numbers, and especially you, more than just numbers. And especially during this time right now when there's a little bit of uncertainty and a little bit of maybe apprehension or wariness with the virus and stuff, just know that God's got you. He's got you. He's concerned with you more than anything else. And he knows what's going on, and he knows the plans that he has for everybody. And God is, he's not surprised by all this. So this is something that he's got under control. Even if it seems like right now He doesn't. He totally does. Okay. And he sees the bigger picture, the way bigger picture than what we see. Right now, all we see is just the moment we're living in, but God doesn't have like a time frame. So he sees before and back and all that kind of stuff. So be encouraged that God sees the ending in all this, and he knows that it's coming. And we should know that it's coming. Okay, Luke 2, 6 through 7. What is the price of 5 sparrows, 2 copper coins? Yet God does not forget a single one of them, and the very hairs on your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are more valuable to God than a whole flock of sparrows. So it's so true. God created you. He gave you life. He breathed his breath of life into you. And that makes you more important than anything on this world. So be encouraged. Hopefully this made more sense to you guys. I know it was a long video. I'm sorry there was a lot to get through. Thanks for hanging in there, but feel free to go back and watch again. And yeah, see you on the next video.